fun.
You were the authoritative guide for them, even where if your age was a problem, if they asked around, other people weren't doing it. And what I also think is genius is these properties, you say 3 to 5 years, you're selling them investment properties. Don't get attached to it because we're just talking numbers here. And I can make you more money later when we 1031 these.
Yeah.
So the relationship is naturally tied to you where you don't have to send them a birthday card every year. It's, oh, I got a question on how to do this. And what about tax question this? And is there any other deals that you see that we could sell that? So that's really cool, Brian.
That was
Let's
the whole
go ahead.
business model was
Yeah.
is they just became very reliant on me, and then we became close friends, and
Yeah.
a lot of the clients, and they then I started turning them all to onto all my tax tips, and
Yeah.
which became very complicated tax tips as it turns out, from depreciation, accelerated depreciation. But there were all these great loopholes. Like sometimes people will talk, you'll hear Trump talk about these things, like where these write-offs that you get as a real estate developer, real estate owner, entrepreneur, and some people will be like, will get mad, and I'm like, that's that you shouldn't be mad. That's what the law allows you to do. And it's not like you don't pay tax. It's just you end up you have other expenses you're paying out significantly, like property taxes, and you're creating jobs, but at the same time, you're creating yourself tax shelters. So
Yes.
this information that I would give to people that I didn't know back then I could charge for it. I was just making my real estate commissions, but a lot of times it didn't matter because I would double in the deals after 90% of the time. So I'd make 6%, then I'd do the loan. So I was making a significant amount of money to be able to buy my own properties and create my own cash flow. And then I had agents, and so I was getting a piece of their action for a long time. And this was before I was fortunate enough to come into real estate as a broker owning a company
Yeah. No,
where,
that's really cool, Brian. And then you talked about building those relationships with those people for years. You have to be the right person. They always say real estate is a team sport and it's a relationship game, which I could argue is any successful role is a relationship business. No one is able to do everything by themselves. But I love that you were able to incorporate that culture and those relationships early on and see the fruits of your labor. It makes sense, right? To keep up with these people and treat them right and they treat you right.
yeah,
And really cool business model.
some of the busiest times of my life between 2000 and 2007. At that time, I got married, and
Hmm.
I'm still with my wife. We're going to celebrate our 25th year to this September. And when we grew the business into two real estate offices with 80 real estate agents, 40 loan officers, like 25 support staff, it's a very different time comparing it to an office that's very Zoom oriented now. Most of my agents don't show up to the office anymore. We're on
Right.
Zoom, we're on email. I'm fortunate enough to have bought the office complex that I still have my office in. I have a physical office, but there's only 4 or 5 of us to report in here now, whereas everyone's on Zoom and via
Mhm.
email. But I've had that. I've been able to, looking back, experience all kinds of really cool things over the because of this career in real estate and investing and the travel that goes along with it.
For sake of time, I'm going to shift the conversation, but we're going to probably revisit the business side of life toward the end again. You mentioned you got married between what, 2000, 2007. Your daughter's going to be 20, so that means she was born 2003, 5.
2005.
Okay.
2005. Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of the show, obviously, podcast called The Invested Fathers. I'm trying to bring on people to challenge the mindset of you got to choose. It's your business or it's your family. Can you have both? And there are obviously times along the way it gets hard and it gets muddy and there's seasons to just work. But share with us some of the lessons learned or the experience of having a daughter and trying to be winning at home and at work and what we can learn from your story on that.
Okay. So when my wife and I first got married in 2000, she was from New York, and we had a long distance romance. And so she worked in the fashion industry of New York, which there is not a fashion industry in California. So she came to work with me in the office. Now, from my perspective, the first 5 years before we had our daughter, was a whirlwind of work in the office, but it was work hard, play hard. And my wife and I did lots of traveling and partying. And, we're a young couple, right?
Mhm.
And I look back at that very fondly. Now, my wife is we should have spent more quality time together at home. And so and she's always been there to remind me of that. And so it's like trying to create that like that balance of working hard. Like I'm naturally an A-type personality, and so I'm
Mhm.
like constantly on the go, especially back then in hindsight. But trying to listen to my wife to be help keep me more grounded. Because I would always take a step back at first and go, okay, you're not as great as you think, and you can work on some things, right? And so that kind of helped keep me grounded. So by the time we started trying to have our daughter and finally had our daughter in 2005, my wife had been there with me in the office working hand in hand for those first five five years. That after she had our daughter, she decided to take a step back and raise our daughter.
Right.
And so I'm here running two offices, 80 agents, 40 loan officers. And right about that time, 2006, 2007, it started to begin to really hit its peak and crescendo just before everything went to hell in a handbasket in 2008.
Right.
Uh, Looking back, we all look at that and we call it the Great Recession.
Hmm.
And in fact, there was a movie called The Big Short
Hmm.
where I was like, oh my God, I relate to that movie so much because I see so many of those locations. And I remember I was there. I was working with Lehman Brothers on some deals, that I hear that they've gone out of business. And so I bring that into the context because right about that time when my wife is at home raising the daughter and working part-time, all these different things are hitting us. And so trying to keep that work balance life schedule really became a lot of acrobatics, right?
Yeah.
Because you're trying to make sure you take the time to come home, have dinner, spend time with your daughter. At that time, smartphones were just really becoming a thing, right? Everyone was still on your little old dial phones, and you have your Palm Pilots, and so there was a lot of juggling. But looking back at it, I'm glad that I did, and I'm glad that we stuck to it because my wife and I always making the point to have come home and have dinner with each other. Now, for me, when we had dinner with each other at least twice or three times a week, that was a big deal, right? I have breakfast every now and then. But looking back now in 2025, my daughter's going to be 20, my wife and I are still together, because we spent that time to really pay attention to our daughter, pay attention to each other, see each other at work. My wife still continues to help me from home and sometimes in the office to manage things. But now things are a lot different than they
Mm.
were back when we there was this huge office atmosphere and everyone saw each other because we all physically met. That whole dynamic has changed. But throughout it, we've been able to roll with the punches just because we've made that commitment to stay with each other and also to raise our daughter and to give her good, strong Christian values and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, and if it wasn't for that work of trying to make that happen, it would be really easy for me to just neglect that and just make it all work. And I've seen some of my friends do that to their detriment, right? They end up in divorce. She gets half. It's bitter. They're off to their second marriage. And that's one of those things where, and again, it hasn't been pretty. It hasn't been easy every step of the way, right? There's been
Right.
lots of arguments, lots of talking through things. And at the end of the day, just kind of getting back together. But it's been really great for our daughter and I because like we always make a point as a family to take multiple trips. Like I'm a huge nerd, for example. And so one of the things that kind of kept us together was my daughter and I and my wife, we'd go to San Diego Comic Con every year. We'd dress up in cosplay and all this kind of stuff. And so you know, keeping the whole physical fitness as a major part of my life helped a lot too, but it was also great for like, wearing cosplay outfits where you're trying to look like a ripped superhero, right? And so those being able to do that, being able to go to work and play hard, with my wife and my daughter in like these kind of fun contexts also kept things really cohesive in the family. So like my daughter and I, we still, and my wife won't cosplay with us, but she will make that being in the fashion industry, which is her original job. She's really cool at being able to design great cosplay outfits for my daughter and I, and then to be that cheerleader. And so that's been a big piece of how do we keep the family together and travel and do nerdy things.
Yeah. Okay. Forgive me. Cosplay. I'm unfamiliar with the term. I actually have some relatives in San Fran who are into Comic Con as well. Like, they've dressed up as Batman and all sorts of other stuff. What is cosplay?
So cosplay is dressing up, costume play.
Costume.
Yeah. So when you use the word cosplay, it's usually associated to nerdy comic book conventions where people will create their own costumes and dress up as a superhero or some character that they like. And San Diego Comic Con is like a Mardi Gras of of the Comic Con world.
Yeah,
So it's one big gigantic party, from Wednesday to Sunday. You'll see a lot of the actors would come out for the movies that you see, and then they throw parties, and we'd make a point to try to get into these parties and things like that. So
I love it.
yeah.
No, that's great. And I feel like there's just a time for that. There's a time when your kids aren't going to be with you forever. And if you can join them in their own exciting things that they like doing, it's the best. My son is 8 right now, so we're into basketball, but teaching him turnaround spin shot and seeing him do it in the game,